Hi, so this is about co-facilitating in a group, which depends on the type of group you have and who the co-facilitators are and what the purpose is of the facilitating, which really goes back to what is the group you're doing. So let's suppose you're doing a mutual aid group, and so the hope is that actually the members become much more active and empowered to help themselves and each other, and that more of what you're doing is keeping the scope of the topic and the depth at a level that is appropriate for that group, and that you allow the group to emerge in helping each other. There's lots of different approaches that one could use, so that's not the end all of what a mutual aid group is and how to facilitate it. If you are co-facilitating within that group, then you might use the co-facilitator as a way of dispersing the attention. So, for example, sometimes if a group is hesitant to take ownership of itself, that you'll find that the members are looking at the facilitator when responding instead of each other. And so using a co-facilitator who sits across the room can help disperse that so that the members have to at least look at one side of the room versus the other, but that you can also encourage where people look based upon where the facilitators look and the body language that the facilitators use. So you can do that without a co-facilitator, but that's one way of using a co-facilitator in a group session. Another way is that you could have one facilitator focus more, say, on body language and to really picking up on that. This is really good if it's a psychotherapeutic group, or one that's just so much is going on, right? So there's a lot of dynamics. You could have one facilitator looking at body language and the other facilitator listening for content and bringing those things up. So one facilitator might say, I'm noticing that you leaned back when so-and-so said something. I'm wondering if you can talk to us about what that is. So that'd be really much more in the nuance. I did groups with a interpreter who spoke Khmer and I don't. And she was also bicultural, so she was Cambodian and had lived and worked in the United States for a number of years. So how we co-facilitated was that there was actually she facilitated more of it because she knew the language and she could field the questions and she could do the interventions, and I really became much more of a third base coach where I would put out what I'm hoping for to her, and then she would figure out if that would fit for this group given the culture, and then she would explain what she and I were talking about to the group, and then she would field that question, and then she would be reporting back to me. Now it's not verbatim reporting back because there's no way that she could translate verbatim in a group that just spoke naturally without having to pause and wait for the interpretation. So that allowed the group to function mainly just upon its own dynamics and the relationships between them. And then my input was a little bit more on the outside and through the interpreter. And I would often address the whole group and say, it sounds like this is one of the things coming up. So I'm wondering about this. And she would interpret it in a way that she felt was culturally accurate. And the reason why I smile is that there's no way for me to know really what she says and what meaning the members took from it. So it's definitely was a challenge on many levels. And it also brought home to me how much I rely on the actual words that members use and voice those words back to people. So it was a challenge on my part, but it was a way for us to use our different strengths for the benefit of the group. Then you could also do it, let's suppose you co-facilitate in the age differences or the ethnic differences or very different, gender is very different. You can play off those differences in support of where the group is going or wants to go. I do know that in some groups, especially those mandated groups, there might be a kind of like a good cop, bad cop, and I'm not a fan of any kind of inauthentic facilitating, so I'm not a fan of that. If it's obvious that one facilitator actually, has, let's suppose it's an addictions group and one facilitator is a recovered addict and has a very specific idea of what recovery is, and the other one, let's suppose, has a very different perspective of it. Instead of trying to force different perspectives, you can play on each other's strengths and be very transparent, which I think is really essential in working in a group. So you're transparent with the members and saying, all right, we come from very different perspectives about what it means to be in recovery and what causes addictions. And so you're going to hear those differences in how we are in this group. And so you allow the group to be aware of what those differences are. And in a sense, they get to decide, well, which of these perspectives fits me better. And so that's not a bad thing, especially if you can use it as a critical thinking, inner development intervention. So there are lots of different ways of using a co-facilitator. Sometimes, most often, you're stuck with a co-facilitator because that's somehow what the agency has decided. And it's usually less about what's appropriate clinically and more about just workforce or the culture of the agency. Why do I bring that out? Because even if you are assigned a group with a co-facilitator, I want you to be conscious and deliberate about how you use co-facilitating. It's an incredibly powerful component of a group. Whether or not you're conscious of it or not, it's a big part of the group. So why not use it to the benefit of the group? Be very conscious with it. What that means is you talk to your co-facilitator before each group session. Talk about what you're hoping based upon last session, so you revisit last session. You talk about, okay, so from that I'm really kind of wondering about what Jane over here was thinking, and I'm thinking maybe the developmental stage of the group is here, and knowing that we only have this many sessions left, I'm wondering if we should maybe start pushing, John over there to whatever. So you guys have really a conscious decision about where you think the group should go. Okay, of course, now that you have that conscious decision, you also have to be prepared to throw the whole thing out the window, because dynamics happen in groups and you may get there and realize, oh, okay, this is what we're dealing with today. And then after the group, check back in with each other, regroup about, okay, so how did it go? What did you think? What do you think this might mean for so-and-so? And how do you think we should have dealt with that? And where do you want to go next session? And then also have a way of communicating with each other during the group session, whether it's certain eye contact or body language or something that says a shift is about to happen, or I need you to pick up on this. I need you to play on your strength over here. Again, I'm going to go back to strengths because, and this is true as a clinician, this is true as a human, know what your strengths are, accept your limitations, and play on your strengths. Doesn't mean that you're not constantly trying to improve yourself, but it also means that you accept, okay, maybe I'm better at doing this over here. And so when my partner over there isn't handling the situation well, then that's my cue to go in, because that's more of my strength. So transparency, knowing your strengths and limitations, being deliberate and conscious about it. When you're deliberate and conscious, you're also choosing where the facilitators sit. So sometimes it's going to be the most appropriate for the facilitators to sit opposite from each other within the group. Sometimes you're going to have the facilitator sitting right next to you, and be mindful. If they're sitting right next to you, that is a very powerful dynamic. If you think about power, you think about roles, you think about where the focus of the vision is going to go with the members and the facilitator. Notice when the person is opposite you. One good thing about that is that you guys can read each other a lot better. It also forces the group members to split their attention from one direction to the next, which could be good or could not be good. You could decide, instead of opposite each other, you could do, like over here and over here. So it's really about understanding that where you sit, how you interact as co-facilitators makes a big impact on the group. So do it consciously. Do it with an understanding that this is what we're trying for, and we're going to use the facilitators to try to enhance that. right.